At the heart of my conversation with Scott Peterson are these questions. What is it that you really want? Are you honest with yourself about that? And what are you doing to get it? Scott Peterson is the founder of Carver Peterson Consulting and author of Beyond the Founder Rainmaker, a book soon to be published by the Skinny platform. Scott has created breakthroughs within many small and medium-sized businesses through sales strategy consulting. And more than that, he's a natural simplifier. Scott has developed a simple yet brilliant framework for assessing clients and customers that results in deeper team alignment and higher business performance, meaning more closed deals and higher revenue. But what I love most about this discussion is that the framework Scott presents can be used to create more clarity and alignment in almost anything, from dating to assessing business partnerships, to thinking through the hats we wear. At its core, Scott's work challenges us to get clear on what we're really after, and then commit to pursuing it. I'm your host, Katherine Jelinek, and this is the Expanders Podcast, presented by the Skinny platform, the place for entrepreneurs with something to share and who want to be heard. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to get to welcome Scott Peterson today. Scott is the founder of Carver Peterson Consulting and the author of the soon-to-be-released book, Beyond the Founder Rainmaker, a book that we are proud to be publishing through the Skinny platform. Welcome, Scott. How are you today?
I'm great. Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So happy to have you. So one of the first questions I like to dig into is, when in your childhood did you first get the inclination or the first initial sparks about what you desired to bring, do, or be in the world? So I'm going to ask that.
Yeah.
And then along with it, whether it's the answer or if it's an addition, when did you begin selling?
Okay. I think those two stories actually might come together.
Okay, great.
I grew up thinking that I was going to be a professional basketball player. I absolutely loved basketball. I loved all sports, but I loved basketball in particular. And I was okay, but not great. And, I think I got to a point where, the varsity coach told me I'd probably never make the team. I ended up making the team, but yeah, I didn't turn into an NBA basketball player by any means. The other side of it is, my dad was a longtime entrepreneur, a business owner. He built custom homes in my hometown of Corvallis, Oregon. And, when it comes to building homes, his audience, a lot of them were working during the day. And so we would have his clients and his prospects at our house, at the dinner table on nights and weekends, talking about, plans or the prospect of working together. And I saw my dad interact with these people in a way that I just thought was really, really cool. And he did great work. He built beautiful homes for 40 years in my hometown. He made people's dreams come true. And so, the idea of helping others make their dreams come true was something that I was always really interested in. To answer when did sales enter this journey? So it actually ties back to basketball. When I was in college at Oregon State, there was a kid on the basketball team that I knew, and I found out through him that, one of the guys had quit the team, someone else had been hurt, and as a result, they were a little short-bodied for practice. And so I asked my friend for the coach's home phone number, or excuse me, for his phone number, and he gave me his home phone number. And I just started leaving messages on his phone and explaining who I was and, a little bit of my basketball history. And long story short, he ended up giving me an opportunity to try out. And I eventually made the team, and I got to play in one game, and I hit a 3. So I have this really grainy old video, that kind of reminds me of the old Rudy story.
Yes.
And it's something that I'm super proud of. So that was the onset of sales. And then obviously,
so cool.
Yeah, tying it back to what I do now, I've spent my entire career in sales, 2+ decades. And the work is partnering with entrepreneurs and helping them make their dreams of these, turning their businesses into, a high performing, profitable, growing business, has been so much fun. And it kind of reminds me in a different make and model of the work that my dad did for all those years.
I get that. I get that. You're helping someone with a vision and a dream really actualize it, helping them with the pieces they struggle to build without someone else there who
Yeah.
can see that design, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I get to be the builder specifically of a high performing sales team.
Right. And especially not to preview too much of what we will be talking about, but not right away, is your real natural gift in creating frameworks that simplify. It's almost like the architecture analogy. Like you're able to draw it out for them and then show them how to start building, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes, that's what it is. So, just a few quick clarifying questions on that magical basketball story. One is, what year in college were you? And then two is, how many calls did you leave on the coach's home phone? Like, how many messages did it take?
Yeah. Okay. So I was a sophomore in college, which meant that I'd spent a year being a frat guy, which doesn't necessarily have you in the best physical condition to make a, Division I basketball team. So when I got the coach's number, what was funny is that it was his home phone, not his work or office phone, and it was his wife's voice on the answering machine. This is like pre cell phone, right? This is 1999, and so I ended up leaving 3 messages, and on the third message, he ended up calling me back, which was a really unexpected turn of events, and I spent. He basically gave me a 4-day notice. The team was on a road trip to the Washington schools, and I spent those 4 days in my old gym, trying to get back into peak basketball shape. So I showed up to this tryout about as sore as I could possibly have been, but it all worked out, and it ended up being just an incredible experience.
That's so cool. I love your tenacity and perseverance in that story.
Thank you. And I've always associated to this underdog story, and I think that's just always been a big part of my DNA. Is undersized growing up, always found a way as a teammate to make the team better, and coachable and hardworking and like caring about the bigger goal. Like those were always attributes that helped me get onto teams that I probably didn't deserve to be on, and has helped me professionally. I just think that there's so much that can be learned and applied from athletics or any other extracurricular. And I've been thankful that I've been able to apply that to the companies that I grew up in, and the organization that I started 10 years ago.
Yes, I hear that theme. And you know what else is interesting is when you say, this thread that carries through of the underdog, I feel like that's also who you are here for. The founder rainmaker is kind of the natural underdog trying to really break through and have the Rudy moment too.
I love that. It's funny, the company that I spent my first 13 years with out of school, we really sold to, the Fortune 500 or 1000 companies,
Mm-hmm.
and companies that were much smaller than that, often like didn't quite match our ideal client profile. And so when I left and started Carver Peterson back in 2014, I found this entrepreneurial community that I'd really never interacted with professionally, but associated with personally from my dad and growing up in this entrepreneur household. It was the most refreshing audience to partner with and work with on a day-to-day. And I really grew to like love and appreciate how smart and dynamic and hardworking and this small business community is, and I think oftentimes it can be underlooked or underserved because of the like top line revenue numbers. But those have been my best and favorite clients to work with, are those small and medium sized businesses.
So, beyond that connection to your past with your dad, what is it about the entrepreneurial space and small and medium-sized businesses? Like, what would you say if you had to put it in one word that makes it feel so much like home professionally?
In one word,
Or two.
it's yeah, it's personal. It's personal, and these big corporate organizations that has a logo and it's the bad, it's that thing versus this entrepreneurial community, the founders in it, and they're living it, and they're doing everything they can to make it what they want it to be, and the aspirational growth and the investment, and it blends and meshes and merges with personal life. It's just not so black and white, and so I appreciate the passion, the investment, the struggle, the reality of what it is. It's just a really personal thing.
That's so cool. And I feel like all the things that you do with the frameworks you've built allow them to kind of capitalize on that personal nature and draw that through into a process that the team can use. Because it's just that natural way of how to connect and share the value you have and communicate about that with the right people, not to jump ahead in our conversation. But it's just a reflection on this. And especially in our world, I feel like everything's driving deeper into the personal, from like media and how we consume information shifting to being more social media driven rather than old fashioned big media. And then even with thinking about things like, PR and marketing, it's, the value of like the paid ads. People are getting less from those than from just continuing to tell their story, the authenticity, the personal nature. And I'm not surprised that you're underscoring that value in sales as well, and why you enjoy working with the invested entrepreneur.
Yeah. It's interesting, the what's the word I'm looking for in sales and sales training. There's a lot of methodologies out there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's when I was with that bigger organization, it was like you kind of take that methodology and you just take it off the shelf and try to apply it. And for these entrepreneurial businesses, it's just not that simple. And so I think there has to be this like customized framework that really, what's the word I'm looking, it that is authentically you, right? Like founders have been able to win business, build businesses because of, in a lot of cases, like who they are and what they're about and the network they've created, and they've become experts in their space. And so they've been able to establish it to what it is, and it becomes really hard to move beyond their own sales efforts. And
Mm-hmm.
so, to give them, so a lot of them sell in a very like entrepreneurial fashion that is hard to replicate, which is why it's been hard to get other sellers into the organization to perform and not only win clients, but especially win the right types of clients. And so, to have a framework that you can customize and extract what is uniquely you and memorialize what is uniquely you into a repeatable framework has been, in my opinion, a difference maker in getting those organizations to grow beyond that founder-led sales.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I'm hearing too is like when the founder rainmaker, your term for this founder who's really owning and driving the large majority of sales, and it hasn't worked yet to scale it beyond them to other team members. It's hard for small businesses because you look at the larger companies out there and you're like, okay, how do I level up into that? But what I'm kind of hearing from you is that kind of thinking can get them in trouble, and they need to do it. There's going to be a system and a process to it. It's not the same as the large companies, and it's doing it their way. And in terms of those frameworks, that's what you really highlight, is figuring out how to create a system around it that fits this smaller, the entrepreneur and the entrepreneurial spirit, and capturing that spirit and enabling others to carry it too, not just, the founder.
Yeah. It's interesting. If you look at the ideal first sales hire for these
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurial organizations, it's not pulling out the top performer from established ABC company that's, been around for however long.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
that's usually actually a big, oh man, I've seen a lot of those go so wrong.
but yeah, like it's just not the right high. So and we think we got like, hey, we found the perfect person. They're a top performer for, ABC or XYZ company that's a Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000. And it just doesn't quite fit because it's a completely different animal. Like those large established organizations, you might have responsibilities that start at point A, and end at C, or go from D to F, or whatever the case. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a very specific role and responsibility, and they're not accustomed to doing things beyond that. We're inside of this entrepreneurial organization. There may not be a process yet, and there may not be a clear strategy yet, and the role definition is less than defined, and like there's just different responsibilities, more entrepreneurial responsibilities that come along with being that first seller, right? So it's just a different beast.
So then who would you recommend that first hire often being? What are characteristics of that
Yeah, so
hire that you've seen?
someone that's more of a builder than a maintainer. So there's got to be entrepreneurial spirit. It's interesting, in some cases it's like the failed entrepreneur, like someone that was willing to go start their own thing, and maybe it just didn't quite work out, but they had that confidence in themselves and spirit and creativity and you know the ability to do things that are less defined,
Mhm.
can be a really good fit. Or maybe it's someone that has worked inside of another entrepreneurial type environment, but like it's a mismatch to culture or vision, or there's just change in the organization that's led them to be open to new opportunities.
Mhm.
But I would definitely want someone that understands the chaos is too strong of a word.
Yeah,
You
but
know what I'm
it's
getting at? Like
real.
it's just not built. And if it is built, it's probably going to evolve and change pretty dramatically. And so if you have the maintainer of like, hey, tell me what to do and I'll do it over and over again, it's just not gonna get it all the way done.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing there is two things. Number one, obviously cultural alignment with, the founder and the organization they're going into. But then two is probably, is it the quick start on the Colby test? Like the one who's got that entrepreneurial, like, I'm going to dive right in and just give it a shot and keep driving, keep diving, keep diving. And it's probably not the person who's going to be there long term, but it's
Yeah.
the important second person, like
Yeah.
after the entrepreneur.
Yeah. And it's a tricky one, right? That first hire. Well, a lot of my conversations start because founder Rainmaker wants to grow, and has attempted to by hiring a first seller,
Hmm.
and it's failed. And the first seller that they often hire is the person that they believe has the Rolodex. We still use that term, I guess, right? Like the
Yeah.
network that matches into the, you know, industry and space that their organization sells into. I've yet to really see that one work. Like I
Why?
uh well, for a couple reasons. One, um relationships only get you so far. There might be certain industries that are very, very relational and can be have some loyalty to a seller. But for the most part, the companies that I'm working with, they're selling some type of complex service, high dollar offering. Um, it's custom, it's complex, and it's just not that simple to move from their incumbent to a new organization just on the relationship. Like there has to be a problem that they're solving, and the problem has to be aligned to the solution. And so when that relationship isn't enough, if it's a relational seller and they're kind of selling themselves on their network, they're really not built toward going in and doing some real like problem identification and solution alignment and selling in a different style. So yeah, I've seen that seller work less. And I've seen my conversation start as a result of that seller not working out.
And needing to start from a different place that isn't just relational.
And needing to start from a different place, i.e., I don't want to be the hamster getting back on this wheel and, trying to solve this problem the same way over and over again. So yeah, some of the conversation has been like the definition of insanity, like doing the same thing over and over again. And so that's where the change, the desire for change comes in, and really reevaluating what's working and what's not. I love the idea of get really clear and tight on strategy, get really defined and streamlined in process, and then the structure becomes much more clear. You can get
naturally.
like such a better understanding of like what is the seat that we needed to define here. And once you get clarity on the seat, obviously you're going to have a much higher likelihood of getting the right person in the right seat.
Mm-hmm. So give us the starter on this strategy, that the work that you do with them, which I'm guessing, I mean, let me know if it's not this, but I'm guessing it's really the orientation on who their blue chip client is
Yeah.
and that framework.
Yeah.
So can you just explain that? And I know that we don't have a graphic up, but they are easy to find. If anyone wants to search Scott Peterson and Carver Peterson, they will find the blue chip framework graphic that we're going to refer to here. So go for it, Scott.
Yeah. So let's hear. What's my backdrop? My backdrop is, most of the companies that I'm working with have limited bandwidth and firepower to go sell. The founder Rainmaker has 1,000 responsibilities in little time. They typically have small sales teams. And so how they're investing their time really, really matters. So examining these organizations, often they've got a small percentage of clients that are driving a large percentage of revenue. They've got a large percentage of clients that are driving a very small percentage of revenue. And then when you look at the time distribution, time is kind of spread out evenly. And so the first thing that I'm really curious about is, how can we maximize time with that small percentage of clients that's driving a large percentage of revenue? And how do we find more prospects just like them? So the model ended up becoming clear to me, over the years in sales. And it was really, the X and Y axis of, X axis, do these prospects or clients meet my financial expectations? Right. So, and however you define that. And then, on the Y, it's, do they align with us culturally? And so by that, I mean, are these the types of organizations that are going to stay with us, grow with us, recommend us, refer us? It's a mutually beneficial relationship. And there's just real value in this. And we've evolved ourselves from vendor to partner. Right. And so when you get the definitions in place of financial alignment and cultural alignment, that top right-hand box where we're a match on both is what I would call blue chip. And so everything for me is blue chip centric. Can we get our sales and our marketing and our account management so focused in that particular box? Not that we're building a wall around it, like any bell curve, right? You're going to have some things that fall in the middle. But what I'm trying to do is move the bell curve to the right so we can have more time and ultimately more clientele in blue chip. And what I'm really looking to minimize or eliminate is that bottom left box, which I would call the graveyard, right? And I refer to it as the graveyard because this is where I have seen businesses and salespeople die when they have too much of their clientele or too much of their pipeline or whatever the case there. Right. So everything is really blue chip focused.
I love this framework. It so simplifies something so impactful and profound and makes it very clear and easy to identify and understand. And it's, I know that you started originally with a checklist, and this was, something your checklist you were working off of when you were still at that larger company and going through a really challenging time, and decided to really just focus on the best client because you almost got pulled down by a graveyard client. Give us that origin story of where this began, even that first checklist that evolved into this framework.
This is probably 20 years ago now, but this is the origin of it all, right? So
Yeah.
I was a young, new seller. I got an opportunity to start a division in our office that didn't exist there currently, but was established elsewhere. By way of positioning, we were the most expensive, but we were really brand new, right? So we had heavy competition. So it was a really, really interesting way to start as a salesperson. And so I'm now maybe 12 or 18 months into my sales career and developing this territory, and the results just aren't there. And so, in the staffing world, you could get an opportunity from a prospect, but it doesn't turn into business until you actually fulfill that requirement. And so I would get requirements, but we just wouldn't fill them. And so I'm sitting with my boss one day and I'm kind of like, I've got business. We're just not filling them, basically pointing the finger elsewhere. And he looked at me and he said, dude, your business sucks. Get better business. And, it was kind of one of those moments of like, he's right. I needed to take a good hard look in the mirror. And so ultimately what came from that conversation was I need to have a way to grade and evaluate these prospects that I'm pursuing. And so I came up with my little checklist that was the, more or less onset or origin of this blue chip client profile. And so I would evaluate these opportunities and I would communicate these opportunities to my team. And now, while the majority of those opportunities that came up weren't perfect, so I had a little 6-point list. I wasn't bringing home 6 out of 6, but if it was a 4 out of 6, I could articulate those things to my team effectively of what was good and also what was missing. And then we could make a decision if this was something that we really wanted to invest our time and resources in. It became clear to me that anything that was at a 3 or lower was just a complete waste of our time. And we weren't even going to entertain it. And so everything had to be 4, 5, and 6 out of 6. And then ultimately I was able to get to like the 5s and 6s more consistently, and the business took off. Right. So my territory, and it was a realization, it was a focus, it was a commitment, it was communication to my delivery team. And it made all the difference in the world.
Clarifying question is those 6 bullets were aspects of the client, right? Like ensuring that they were, had certain.
It was a combination of the cultural and financial criteria that I had developed for that individual business that I was selling.
Mm-hmm.
So
outlining your ideal client with 6 bullets of criteria.
Yeah. And you had mentioned earlier about, this graveyard prospect, like kind of right around the same time that I was going through this and my boss was unhappy with my performance. I'd scheduled this meeting with a company that I knew at best it was going to be a 3 out of 6, but I was desperate. We needed new opportunities and new work. And so I went to this meeting and everything about it just screamed graveyard. And I walk in and quickly, am walked out with this prospect wanting nothing to do with me or our services. And I felt like I had been rejected from the worst of the worst. And it was just one of those moments where I was in my car and about as discouraged as I could have possibly been, questioning, not only did I belong in that role or organization, but did I belong in this profession? And it was that kind of coupled with this conviction of this blue chip strategy and a competitiveness and fire that like I wasn't going to go down without swinging. That helped me break through and was the pivotal turning point of my professional career.
There's so many lessons wrapped up in that story. And obviously it became the huge inflection point, a trajectory shifter, and was the seed for now a framework and a methodology and a process that is your business and lifestyle, which is incredible. I mean, what a big moment there. But honestly, Scott, I sit here and I think what you have on your hands is so much more than a sales tool. And I know that that's its primary function and use, but what you so easily encapsulate with your 2x2 on Blue Chip Client is how it is so inefficient to go for the thing that we really don't want, and how much more naturally efficient it is to just go after the thing we really want. I mean, yeah, there needs to be homework done in regard to like, what can you do? What is it that you really want? Are you lying to yourself regarding what you want? So some deep diving needs to happen to outline that. But I mean, this applies to so many different things. I remember, the week after we had your interview to do, the production of your book, it was really just hitting me regarding, I feel like our culture has some growth to do because we're not really honest with ourselves about what we want. And a lot of us, in a lot of ways, are pushing ourselves through situations. And it's not just with customers that we think we need to stick with. It could be like jobs, relationships, partnership, like the things that just like hats that we wear, things that aren't really what we want. And when we are matched up with those clients, those partnerships, those seats that we really, really want, whoa, like everything explodes in the best way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think back to when I first started Carver Peterson, there were two factors. One, I didn't know where I didn't know where my sweetest of spots was at the time. And so there was this kind of unknown, and figuring that out of where do I add the most value and who are the ideal clients that I really want to partner with. So unknown is one. And then the second factor was fear and a scarcity mindset of, hey, if I get too narrow and too specific, then I'm going to miss out on opportunities that I not only want, I think, but that I need. And that's a really scary place to be. And so when I started this and was socializing it with, friends and family and some of the early strategic partners that I got to know, they're like, well, who do you do this for? So cool. You're doing some sales work, who do you do it for? And I'm like, I grew up in a professional services company and, so that seems like a pretty good fit. And it's like, it was so broad and so generic that no one could ever get clear on like one particular person that they thought could be a good fit. So it just was so generic. And it's taken me years to get more refined and more focused and more clear. And I still think that I've got room to get clearer on the exact pursuit of the blue chip client. But what I've found over these years is that I love working with B2B technical services firms. They're typically between 2 million and 20 million in revenue. And it's led by a growth-minded leader who wants to build and grow and scale in a sustainable way. And they're willing and able to change, so there's some demographics, there's some psychographics, and I think I can get even tighter and more intentional because those have been the best clients. Those have been the ones that stay and grow and recommend and refer. And they've been these mutually beneficial relationships, but it's hard to figure out and it's hard to commit to.
Yes. First of all, want to highlight that I love that you are not an example of like the cobbler shoes, right? You're constantly like working your own process on yourself and refining it and highlighting, I have deeper to go. And I'm like, ooh, I love that self-awareness. That's so cool that you're on the journey and you're continuing on it and there's no perfect. That's great. Okay. So, but when you say the commitment, I hear there, that's the highlight around getting around the fear of not just keeping yourself open to everybody. Because I think a lot of us in businesses and entrepreneurs, we start with like, anybody can use this.
Yeah.
I don't want to narrow. Like, yeah, there is a scarcity mindset. There's like, I don't want to miss out on who might say yes if I just really focus on something smaller. And then there's also the truth of like, it does take some time to understand who the right fit is and what we're doing and how that's special and who that is most special for. So that does take some time, and the time of doing it and learning from doing. But is there any way to accelerate that? Besides like the fear side, we can just put that on the, put that aside for now, but how can we accelerate that learning of who really is right for us and not just keep our doors wide open for everybody, which means nobody.
Yeah. It's funny. The majority of my clients are established businesses, not
Hmm.
startups, so they
Right.
have this historical data. And so they've been able to express, like, kiss some frogs.
Yeah.
They've got graveyard clients sitting there right now. And
Mm.
and so, they're the exercise, and I'll get to your question in just a moment, of how do we accelerate this. But the exercise, when I get an opportunity to start working with some of these teams, is we put that 2x2 grid up, that blue chip matrix, and introduce the X and Y, create some loose definition around it, and then start to actually plot out their existing clientele in those 4 boxes. When you bring the stakeholder group together for this exercise, there tends to be some really interesting dialogue. So, for the most part, we can agree on, like, here's a couple names that pop up right to mind with blue chip. Here's a couple names that pop right to mind for graveyard. And then the other 2 boxes, financially aligned, culturally misaligned, I call dirty money. Culturally aligned, financially misaligned, I call make it count. And so there ends up being, as we're plotting companies into these 4 boxes, a lot of disagreement. Why would you put that there? I think they're this. Do they really meet our financial expectations? Are they really culturally aligned? What about this? What about that? And so you can see almost immediately this lack of definition and lack of clarity of where things really sit. And it just gets really interesting really fast. And then the other very, is it surprising? I don't know if this is surprising or not, but almost everybody has a large population of graveyard clients.
Hmm.
And these are companies that are less than aligned financially, in some cases in the red, negative. For lack of a better way to say it, maybe just a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Definitely putting current employees that are serving these clients in positions that they don't want to be in, putting their business reputation and brand at risk by maintaining clients that are less than happy or challenging to work with. And so there's some real, like, risks and danger in working with this graveyard client, but they're still sitting there. So how do you accelerate the process, right? So if you're a newer organization, to me, it's the retrospectives, quarter over quarter. So it would be like creating real definition around ideal client profile, which I call blue chip, and then, through your weekly sales meetings, talking about how does this align to blue chip, and if it's misaligned, is it a 4 and 5 or 6 out of 6, or is this a 3 or 2 or 1 out of 6? I'm just kind of tying back in my past analogy, right? So whatever your definition is, and so we're maintaining our standard throughout prospects that are coming into our pipelines, and then, constantly going through that reevaluation process. It's hard to know in when they're prospects exactly where they're going to land. There's more that we will learn about them as organizations and customers as we work further into the relationship. So it's possible that what we think may be one thing could turn into something different. And so to go through that exercise quarterly is a really helpful exercise to bring more clarity and more refinement to that ideal client profile, and just continue to get your positioning tighter and tighter and tighter.
Mm-hmm. Just put the names on this graph, like plot them out and continue to ask those questions. Look at it again and again, put them on there, and then ask why. What is defining this person as blue chip for me? What's defining this as graveyard for us? But what I love what you said is that everyone has graveyard clients.
Yeah.
So what you're saying there is everybody knows what they don't want. Even if you're
Yeah.
just starting, you probably know a lot about what you don't want, at least from past experiences, and why you're even starting what you're starting. So you can start there, because what you do want is not what you don't want.
That's true. You said that so much more simple than I did in terms of the process. Yes, that's exactly right.
Well, it's a big deal to realize that we all have that,
Yeah.
We all have the school of hard knocks to
Yeah.
look back on.
Yeah. I didn't meet my wife until later in life, so went through the process of dating
Yes.
and dated some wonderful people, and also dated some people that just weren't my person, a
Uh-huh.
lot of people that weren't my person. And so like you can apply it to dating
You
and
can apply it to dating.
and
So
so
I see that.
and not that I'm advocating for a checklist of things, for your perfect partner, but
Mm.
to understand like what's really important to you in a relationship and what's not. And again, my clientele tends to be selling services where it's not just a one-time product sale. And so, maintaining an ongoing relationship is a really important thing. And so you can apply the dating terms to it. Like, are we going on one date and that's it? Are we going to talk about like getting into a real relationship together and a commitment together? And if so, how do we make sure that we move from just being a vendor to a true partner? And what I've found in the clients that I work with is that that's what they deem blue chip fit is these like real partnership relationships. They're not necessarily buying them because they're the cheapest, but they're creating some real value and being able to pull out some of those aspects of that and bring it into their blue chip client profile is a really powerful thing, especially if I'm a new seller coming into an organization, to know what to look for and what to ask about and really what to seek and pursue.
There's so much wisdom in what you're sharing and what you just shared. And we really do, like, we all really at our core want to help people, want to show up and like what we're doing, want to be partnered and engaged with people we like, and that like it feels good and it feels like what we're offering is being received and valued. It's like, wow, what a shocker, that we can continue to seek that and name it and put, more terminology around it so that we know what we're looking for.
To jump in there,
Yeah, dude.
what's been really interesting is that this simple model has created just that. It's like there's all of a sudden this language that that very quickly people understand and can apply. And so it's interesting, I'll get an opportunity to do like an initial workshop with somebody, and when we come back together for round two, I'll find that they have adopted that language, whether we end up working formally together or not. Like the simplicity of that framework and just having a way to categorize and distinguish. And it's not as simple as like four static boxes as much as it's a very fluid thing. And some are higher or lower or more further left or right than others. But just to have some framework and some definition allows focus, intentionality, clarity. And then I just kind of go back to where this whole thing started was the time distribution. You've got limited firepower, limited bandwidth. How and where is your team spending time? And if we can just tilt them, point them, get the majority of them and their time to that top right box, then positive outcomes are coming from that.
And it's fascinating too how much once we get into that top right box and are engaged with our blue chip clients or blue chip dating partners or our blue chip team members, whatever it is, how much energy gets unleashed when we're with the right thing, because you realize how much energy was being used when things weren't right. Like it's like such a huge battery drain, resource drain, time drain. So when things are aligned and it's a right fit, the the benefit is so much, it's exponential
Yeah.
when you really can get in that quadrant. It's fun and fascinating. I love how much this can really be used on so many things beyond customers, but the fact that you're able to drill this down and create this simple and mind-blowing framework that focuses on sales, that you can just take it and use it on talent and on partnerships and how to analyze anything where, yeah, you're anything that relates to partnerships, really,
Yeah.
where there's two engaged parties.
Yeah. The blue chip relationships I have found that that's where most of the innovation comes from too,
Mm,
where there's trusted clients and partners that start to ask questions like, hey, could you do this? Or would you be willing to do this? Or does this make sense? And so it's pretty engaging from an innovation and development standpoint of yeah, I think this is something that would make sense for our relationship. So I've found, both myself and through clients that, there's been opportunities for continued growth there because that relationship and trust is so strong. So, and again, just the opposite in that graveyard box, right? Where, the damage that can come from it is just extremely challenging, and it kind of forces us to tighten up more than anything else. The one last thing that I think I want to get into there is that there's different schools of thought of, how do you leverage your top talent in your organization. And I've always been in the camp of you put your best people on your best opportunities, and just kind of working that magic together. And so it's funny, that same 2x2 blue chip model, you can very easily repurpose to the same like 2x2 people box, with the top right box being, performance aligned and culturally aligned. And now all of a sudden you've got your peak performers. I love putting, peak performers with blue chip clients and seeing that really come together.
right, because then that's so much more natural trust, alignment, unleashed energy by the right fit, being with the right fit.
Yeah. And the last thing that I would want to do is put a peak performer with a graveyard client or territory, and now they're pulling their hair out. And
Right.
that's where, hoping that we could turn something around or make something out of nothing. That's draining. That's frustrating. That's, peak performer that's now all of a sudden looking for work elsewhere.
Right. And your personal story of almost, getting out of the business because of a graveyard client really highlighted to me how much confidence we lose when we're trying to make something work that just shouldn't be what we're trying to focus on. You
Yeah.
know, you naturally lose confidence when you're trying to, square peg round hole it. And
Yeah.
it's funny because I can easily relate that idea to dating as well. It's like you can easily lose confidence when you're trying to go out with the wrong people thinking you're going to build confidence. It's counterintuitive. You're going to lose confidence. You might as well go straight for that person that you think is like
Yeah.
the best,
Yeah.
and realize that that's the other thing is I think, why do we have it programmed in our head that we're going to build our confidence by laddering up through things that don't fit, but we think it's going to like, okay, we're just going to start there and keep working up. we it's counterintuitive. It totally doesn't work.
Yeah.
Like this like kind of moonshot of like go straight for what you want instead. That actually is relatively better given like when we think about it through your framework.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why, I love when there's an established organization that has data, and you can start to examine that data and really understand, okay, these are the types of organizations demographically that tend to be in that top right box versus bottom left. So even if it's just small differences, from a demographic standpoint, and then the psychographics tend to be more obvious, where it's like, hey, this is how these organizations treat us, talk to us, articulate what they value. There's just some really obvious things, and so the data and the history can really bring those profiles to life.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
One other thing that's worth mentioning here is that, plotting these clients out across this 2x2, it really ends up, becoming a litmus test for your core values. So I've seen a lot of organizations say things like, we value our people over profits or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And then, all of a sudden when we start mapping this stuff out, largest client is financially aligned but culturally misaligned. And so we've got them in that top left box, which I would call dirty money. And now do we as business owners, are we willing to do something to move that engagement right. So enter into some tough conversations, provide some feedback, at the risk of losing the relationship because we are truly putting our people over profits. So the dirty money box is a tricky and challenging one, and we tend to get a lot more confidence in stepping away from bad business or stepping into tough conversations when we've been able to fill up that blue chip box a bit further and we're not held hostage into these bad clients that are supporting the majority of our payroll, for example.
Yep. It really puts, their money where their mouth is.
Yeah.
To especially assess those, the financially aligned and culturally misaligned,
Yes.
the dirty money.
Yes.
And what are you going to do about it? And how are you
Yeah.
going to shift it? Are you going to do anything about it? Yeah. That's tough. That calls a lot into question. But those are the questions that need to be asked, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Having grown up in a staffing company, so that's where I spent my first 13 years. It was the term that we talked about often was the war for talent. And that terminology still stands today. And I think it's become even more challenging to, recruit and engage and retain your top talent. And, for a lot of these smaller organizations, it's critical, right? Like there could be opportunities that are paying more or, a career path that's more clearly stated or, whatever. And so how are we making sure that the people that we have in our organization, our top talent is really getting the best opportunity to perform, and that's one of the reasons why I like putting my best people in my best opportunities, best territories, best prospects, best clients, best whatever. And not to say that I'm trying to give anybody else the short stick, but I think probably the biggest detriment that I've seen is that, hey, come on in, the world is your oyster. And that has been articulated through the hiring process or while the person's there as this like, you've got a blue ocean or green pasture or whatever, like that should be really exciting. And the reality is that this top performing seller is saying like, oh shit, like this is wildly inefficient and I've got to go figure out where the right business is in the blue ocean or the green pastures. Like, can you point me more clearly to where I have the highest likelihood of winning and winning the right types of clients that are going to stay with us and grow with us and recommend us and refer us to other blue chip prospects? Mm-hmm. So it's not helpful. It's not a positive thing to be saying that to a seller. The best thing that you could do would be to say, here's our exact ideal client profile. These are the demographics. These are the psychographics. These are the trigger events. This is the type of investment that we're looking for. And here's where you go find them. I would so much rather have a prospect list of 10 than 1,000.
Arm them and give them focus and let their natural gift that you've already seen get unleashed in that context.
Yeah.
Yeah. Make it easier for them in that important way.
Yeah. And then the one other thing that's on my mind here is, we work so hard to build this clientele. And, so let's say that you've got 10 clients or 100 clients or 1,000 clients, whatever the number is, right? And once they're on board, how intentional are we being with them, from a proactive, thoughtful, partnership only conversation, rather than just kind of staying in that like typical day to day, or even like, playing around a golf or going out for a meal. I'm talking about like sitting down with your best clients and having a real conversation around how you're performing, what's working well, what's not working well, and how we can help you reach your desired future state. Mm-hmm. And so all too often, the squeaky wheel is getting the grease here from an account management standpoint, and we're not giving our best clients our best attention and our best resources, right? So as founder Rainmaker, while you're spread thin, maybe there are 5% or 10% of your clients that are worthy of a really thoughtful very well prepared meeting to ensure that you're earning those 4 R's: retention, repeat business, recommendations, and referrals.
Not to just overfill us with analogies, but you're also making me think of a marriage. We both have young kids and are in great marriages. And it makes me think of how, like, you're doing great, but you actually need to keep going on dates and
Yeah.
checking in on the marriage. Or else during all of this like awesome creation and making of a wonderful life, like things can get really like stressful. And it's similar, like in any really great partnership, you actually have to care for the partnership and create those regular check-ins in order to nurture it and keep it great.
Yes.
Or else things can go wrong, even
Yep.
when there's a great family. you know, like
Yeah. Life
it's
can get in the way, right? Business can get in
yeah,
the way of having some really thoughtful and intentional conversation that's critical for the long-standing relationship, right?
right.
We can just kind
Maintaining
of easily
alignment.
let things erode if we don't.
Yes. Yes, because chaos, life and business is chaos, like you said before we started recording, and it's important to to handle that chaos with intentional realignment. So I want to just close with a few quick questions. What do you think, if you had to summarize, and like again, sorry to ask you for a word, but in one word, what is the main outcome of doing this blue chip framework and the work around it?
Yeah, the word's transformation.
Mm.
And the if I could pick one more, it would be identity. Um, so it's funny, when I first started doing this work, I thought that I was just creating sales playbooks, and it was a great deliverable. Like, it's like, we would work through this methodology, we'd customize things, and at the end of it, they'd have their sales playbook and their training guide that was incredibly helpful for them to go build their high performing sales team. The reality as years have gone by and I've now had clients talking to prospects, kind of what I heard through all of this dialogue between them was the journey itself created this deep level of understanding and awareness and conviction and beliefs that created this identity that had never been there before. It was like, yeah, we brought people in and I just kind of assumed that they were able to do whatever they do because they'd done it somewhere else rather than having like their own way. And so we go do this work together, which takes about a quarter to accomplish. And they walk out of it with this transformation and this identity of, no, this is our way. And whoever comes in now comes into their way rather than bringing to the table whatever they bring. So that's it.
Yeah, it gets embodied, like their values. It sounds like it can feel them drilling deeper, but then having like the focus, obviously, of this whole, this work is to have the ripple effect on revenue, sales, stronger partnerships. But in the meantime, they are like codifying themselves and living it deeper.
Yeah, there's this real conviction that comes from it that in the past was kind of wavering. Hey, this worked for me, and I don't expect you to be me, so do it your way, and I'll kind of try to stay out of your way. But that's not what I've seen work. What I've seen work is that you go build this thing, and then you bring the person in to execute the thing.
I'm going to close with an appreciation for you, and also just like want to highlight the last thing about your work, and then you can say anything else as we say goodbye here. But how awesome, how simple this is. Like, I love something that is simple and mind-blowing, and you certainly created it here. So congratulations on being a magical simplifier with what you're able to. I mean, this framework can clarify and empower. So it's pure magic. I'm thrilled for you. I'm excited about the launch of your book and the fact that therefore this concept gets to be shared with others. And then here's my little, this is the end of the year in general. We're headed into the holiday season. So when this episode airs, it'll probably be in December. It's a great time, listeners, to, if you're an entrepreneur, great. If you're a retired grandparent sitting at home, great. Like, you've got something in your life that's probably rubbing at the end of the year that you can reflect on that's not perfectly in alignment for you, whether that's like, the vacations and where you're spending your time, to like your customers or the people on your team. There's going to be some use for sitting down and drawing this out and thinking about something critically as you go into next year and how can you live more of your blue chip life. That's my sales pitch to everybody. But just because it really is that useful, I will challenge our listeners. How can you orient yourself more towards what you want? And now this is an awesome, simple graph to think about that with. Okay, there's my sales pitch. I'm done. But go ahead, Scott, before we say goodbye. Anything else from you?
That's really cool. That's a really cool distilling of this work. I love that a lot. What do I want to say? The one thing that you'd mentioned there was around simplicity. Over these last 2 decades and really over the last several years, sales has become more and more complex. CEB's research talks about the increasing number of stakeholders that are involved in the decision-making process, which means as sellers that we need to get more stakeholders involved in the buying journey and our sales process together. And so I do believe that simplicity is just a really, really important, is it a skill? The ability to simplify things is really important in today's complex world of sales. And so I'm thankful that, that you see my frameworks this way and that they have been able to help create clarity and focus and intentionality for the clients that I've had an opportunity to partner with. And I'm really proud of that work. So I'm glad, I'm really, really proud of the impact that it's having with so many of these growth-minded entrepreneurs. And then, I'd like to end with just, my gratitude to you and Ben and Dan, the Skinny platform. It's just been a really cool thing. This has forever been a dream of mine to, write a book and further develop my expertise. And I think this process has helped me do just that and create even more clarity in terms of the impact of these frameworks that have been created. So you guys have been awesome, and I appreciate you very much.
Thank you so much, Scott. I so appreciate that and the sweet little infomercial to end our time with. I appreciate that. And just to continue to say, cool that this framework, it really does work. I know several of your clients, and the what I have noticed is that when a framework really is like that simplifier that really works is when it creates that new common language that people can easily adopt. Like when you see people shift their language around something immediately because you just blew their minds and opened their eyes with something like a graph. Like that's, to me, that's you can see, oh, it's doing what it should. And it absolutely is in your case. I'm seeing the ripple effects everywhere with the common language that's now used by those who know you. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Scott, and thrilled to share this with others. And definitely take a look and check out Scott's book, the Beyond the Founder Rainmaker. Wonderful. Okay.
Thanks,
take care, everyone. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Expanders Podcast, presented by The Skinny Platform. You can catch more episodes and be notified of newly released episodes by following us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or subscribing on YouTube. For more information on the Expanders Podcast and The Skinny Platform, visit our website, www.theskinnyplatform.com.